The Jersey Swap podcast is sponsored by Apollo Home. Folks, the FC is on a hot streak, but that doesn't mean you need to be warm in your house as spring temperatures rise. Keep your house cool with a $29 HVAC cooling tune-up from Apollo Home. Also, just for CST listeners, Apollo Home is offering a $1,101 off of a new AC unit. That's right, $1,101 off. That's a heck of a coupon, folks. No other podcast is going to give you that large of a discount on anything. That's CST's gift just for you. Give Apollo a call, send them a text, or schedule online at apollohome.com. The podcast is also sponsored by Beyond Exercise. Beyond Exercise is a local physical therapy and fitness business that helps people stay active and injury-free. In fact, they help some of our local MLS, MLS Next, and FCC Academy players with their health and performance needs. Check out their suite of services at gobeyondexercise.com. Okay, it's up to you, New York, New York. I'm not a singer, so I'm not going to even try the lyrics for that. Welcome back to the Jersey Swap podcast. We're on our way to the Empire State. Personally, we're going to make the away trip this time around. We have a solid winning streak in our back pocket right now. We were 4 for 4 in April. We'll see if we can continue it facing New York City FC this weekend. They pounced us out of the playoffs last year, so it's time to see if the Orange and Blue can get some level of comeuppance down there, up there, wherever we're going. We have Andrew Leigh from Hudson River Blue joining us once again this week. Maybe this time around we'll actually swap something if we can say hi to each other, maybe a scarf or a good T-shirt or something like that. Andrew, long time no see. How are you doing?
Doing well. Happy to be back. Thank you for having me back. Excited to see this match at Citi Field after these teams played at Citi Field in the playoffs. Not too long ago in 2024. So a return for Cincinnati. They're in much better shape at this point in the new season than NYCFC is. So you come in on that 5-match winning streak. NYCFC got a win in Toronto, but it's been a bit of a mixed start to life under Pascal Jansen, the new head coach. So it's an interesting time. I think people are still waiting to see which direction NYCFC is really going to go this season, just because they have a lot of open designated player spot. They have flexibility, and they've still yet to really figure out what their team is going to look like. I think by the time the push for the playoffs really intensifies during the late summer.
Yeah, you've really checked off everything on my list. We should maybe just end the show now.
No, man. I mean, there's still so much more to discuss, though, including Citi Field. So you're making your first trip to Citi Field, right?
Yes, absolutely. I've made trips to New York before, but they were never for like my purposes. I'm going there finally for a small little vacation, and so we've got tickets to go see the game at Citi Field. But I know that you guys also play quite a bit at Yankee Stadium, calling that more your home field. I guess the first question right off the bat is, how different is the experience at Citi Field compared to Yankee Stadium?
Well, it's interesting just because I think Citi Field now feels almost more significant than Yankee Stadium as a home venue, because the permanent NYCFC stadium is coming across the street from Citi Field in 2 years, Etihad Park, which will be open for business in 2027. So Citi Field is right across the street where the stadium is going to be. So it's very much like now I think we're in the trial period of permanent moving to Queens. Like they've dabbled in Queens and sort of like visited their friends in Queens on the weekends regularly over the course of their existence since they started playing at Citi Field in 2018. Basically was the first game that they played there against Columbus Crew, actually, back in the Greg Berhalter days of the Crew. Not to bring up the hated enemy of the FC Cincinnati listeners here. But yeah, so at Citi Field, I think it's become sort of I would say the fan darling of the two home venues between Yankee Stadium and Citi Field. I think partially because fans know this is going to be where you're going to be going for every home game coming up pretty soon once the stadium is finished and done with construction. So as a soccer venue, it's still a baseball stadium that's being converted. So it's still not your ideal place to watch the sport be played. And the field brings with it all the quirks that you're used to seeing from watching an FC Cincinnati NYCFC match at Yankee Stadium too. I mean, very tight, narrow confines. Counters are really easy to pull off because you can turn around and be in on goal really quickly with a couple passes if you get caught with too many people pushed upfield, kind of thing. So it usually creates for some exciting attacking games between teams that when they come out trying to score, it's usually more common to happen on the baseball fields. And I think Citi Field is sort of, both Yankee Stadium and Citi Field got built opened in 2009 for the first time. And since then, I think people have sort of said that Citi Field is a nicer stadium, just sort of aesthetically and as a fan going to a stadium than Yankee Stadium. It has a little bit more character. Yankee Stadium has a bit of the feel of the sort of corporate, like gray, basic starter stadium that was popular in the late 2000s, before the 2010s kind of era. And like, it's good. It looks like the old Yankee Stadium. It's fine, but it's a little bit sort of bland. And I think Citi Field has better concessions, has better. It's a nicer looking kind of place, I think. So it's a cool place to check out. I definitely think it's interesting to visit this part of Queens now, because it's going to become very different than what it's been. It's famously was the setting referenced as the Valley of Ashes in The Great Gatsby.
Oh yeah.
So that's like the big ash heap that basically was polluted for generations in Flushing, that's now being developed for the first time, after years of being a lot of like auto body shops, a lot of basically just sort of a forgotten corner of Queens that was very industrial and very sort of not developed in many ways, has now getting tons of apartment housing, a school, a lot of retail space, green space, plus the soccer stadium. So it's kind of being refigured and reimagined than it was, for forever in the history of the part of Queens. So it's cool that this is a part of it, that the stadium is coming there. So it'll be interesting to check it out. Just this, you're making this visit now. If you come back in a few years, it could look entirely different than what you're going to see now when you go out there. So it's cool. I mean, it's a cool spot, knowing that it's going to be the sort of permanent place where NYCFC will be. The teams moving, all their front office are moving into the stadium when the stadium's built. So they're going to be fully a Queens centric operation, which they really haven't been since the inception of the team. So that's going to be very interesting. It's a big transition coming up in a couple of years.
Yeah, and seeing some of the renderings, like if people don't start calling it the Madison Cube Garden, like I've seen from like
the Cube.
Futurama, if they call it the Cube, I mean it's just the perfect pairing, I think, with all of the sites that are on New York City's grounds. Let's go a little bit more into really how the team has been doing. I mean, you guys knocked us out. You stuck around for that big Hudson River Derby matchup with Red Bulls, and then suddenly, and maybe I don't know if it's suddenly or if this was expected, Nick Cushing is out the door. And so you brought up in the rundown, Pascal Jansen is now the brand new coach. He's worked with AZ Alkmaar. He's had a lot of experience within some of the smaller leagues. I mean, if you can call the Dutch league small, he was in the Hungarian leagues as well. But what are your thoughts on sort of the former and the current coach of NYC?
I think with Nick Cushing, he sort of felt like he had done as much as he could with the group of players that they had. And I think the big reason for the coaching change was that the front office invested quite a bit in signing players like Julian Fernandez, Agustin Ojeda, who were pretty expensive U22 initiative signings that I think cost each around $5 million. And neither of them really flourished under Cushing either. Ojeda, 2024 was his first year in MLS. So he had basically last season and had some moments where he looked good, but didn't really stick as a consistent starter or really as a regularly used sub, and was sort of out of the team by the end of the season. Same kind of thing happened to Julian Fernandez, who I would say started brightly and looked like he was going to grab a hold of a starting spot, but then did not keep it, and also was sort of out of the team by the end of the year. And I think that the organization expected more player development out of the sort of high-priced youngsters that they invested in. Jovan Mijatovic, another player who's no longer with NYCFC, who they paid, I think, a club record transfer fee to sign from Red Star Belgrade, and expected him to maybe be like the sort of heir apparent to Tati Castellanos as striker. But he just did not pan out, and pretty much immediately you could tell it was not a good pairing between NYCFC and him, because he just never seemed to acclimate to MLS. He was 18 years old when he was coming here. So again, they rolled the dice on a lot of expensive young talent. Cushing, I think, was the person held responsible for those guys not developing last year as they expected them to. And now I think Pascal Jansen is in. They paid a sort of release clause to get him out of Ferencváros in Hungary, where he was the manager for that team that expects to make the Champions League and sort of win the Hungarian league every year. So it was a move with some ambition to sign him, to basically poach him from Hungary, and bring him over. And he made the semis of the UEFA Conference League, I think 3 seasons ago with AZ, when he was in the Netherlands still. And he has a big reputation for developing young players. So he worked with Milos Kerkez from Bournemouth when he was back in the Dutch league coming up. He worked with Cody Gakpo in the Netherlands, and he was
yeah.
still there before he moved. So he's like a young player whisperer, as what he's been referred to, I think. So I think that's why they wanted him, to help the sort of group of youngsters that are still there, that they expect to be the next sort of great nucleus of an NYCFC team, like take the next step this year. And so far, I feel like it's been mixed, just because some of it, I think, is that the roster has gone through turnover and lost some key players where they've yet to replace them. Some of it, I think, is the new coach trying to get a feel for who he can sort of rely on and who he trusts and doesn't trust still, which I don't think has really been figured out after 10 games yet. And they have the exact same record that they had after 10 games last year. So
really,
exact same record. They've scored one more goal than they did in 2024. So far, it's been a very much net, nothing has changed. But I think that the coach, as a coach, seems more, I would say, no nonsense. He seems more sort of like, it's not that there wasn't accountability when Nick Cushing was in charge, but Pascal Jansen has been very quick to sort of call out mistakes when they've been made. He's been a much more sort of, if things are going wrong, he's not going to sugarcoat it. He's not going to sort of immediately take these sort of diplomatic, softer route of either criticizing or discussing what's happening with his own team. He has pretty high expectations. I think he's not afraid to publicly sort of like make clear when something's not working for him, or when somebody has not performed the way that he expected them to. So I think it's a different level of expectation and accountability, and just like a raising of the bar is what they wanted by hiring him. And so far they're trying, and seemingly maybe there are some signs of that, but it hasn't really been, I would say, transformational yet. Like the young players haven't blossomed yet under him. They only have really signed one, I would say, new player that wasn't sort of a draft pick or homegrown from the academy signing. So it's basically the same team with players removed from last season that has yet to really click this year. And they've got 4 wins, but they haven't been the most convincing, even in the games that they've won yet. So this is going to be a really tough test for them, even if it's a home game. They perform much better at home historically, NYCFC in general. But Cincinnati's also played really well the last couple seasons while playing against NYCFC on the road. So I wouldn't expect this to be an easy one, even if NYCFC is usually better at home.
Yeah, I mean, looking really at how they've gone through the first 10 matches or so. I mean, you mentioned that only 4 wins, but you're looking at some of them. They a 2-1 home victory against Orlando, a 1-0 victory against Philadelphia at home. Both are impressive in their own rights. But you've hung around, I think, also with some of the losses. A very competitive 4-3 loss against Atlanta. So there's performance. You're facing some strong teams, or teams that are advertised to be strong to start the season. And maybe you're starting to get more Toronto FCs in the future, where the team can maybe feast on some of the lower talent out there. I'm not throwing shade at Toronto, but it is the lower section of the table.
Well, they had a really tough start to the season because their first 2 matches were away at Miami and then away at LAFC. So that's like
that 2-2 draw at Miami. That was impressive.
And that was a game that they should have won. They were up 2-1 going into the death of the match, basically, and conceded an equalizer. So that's also been a sort of a concerning trend, where they've had multiple games so far this year where they've held leads going deep into a game and not been able to see out either a win, or they've seen wins go from wins to losses. And that's what happened in Atlanta, where they were up on Atlanta and conceded a bunch of goals. Like self-inflicted wounds late in games have been a problem so far through the 10 games. And that crapped its head a little bit even late under Cushing a season ago. So the team, I think, is still, they have a lot of young players that they rely on. Part of the thing that they've done since losing somebody like James Sands, who was a homegrown player, but who was a veteran at this point and left to go play in the Bundesliga with St. Pauli, they hadn't signed a replacement for him until, the last day of the MLS primary transfer window a week ago. And they were relying on 18-year-old Jonathan Shore, who's an academy product, who's a homegrown, to basically fill in for him for the first, 10 games of the season. And I think that's kind of been where they've been at, where they haven't really replaced players like James Sands or Santiago Rodriguez, who were key guys to why they made as far as they made last year, that are gone. And they've been in sort of wait and see with what they have available on the roster throughout the first part of the season, which has left them with a pretty thin roster and a lot of sort of inexperienced and young players being asked to step in and play parts that they maybe not expected to be playing, given the fact that they hadn't debuted even in MLS yet. So it's been, I think, a weird period of transition where the coach was their priority one. They got the sort of experienced European head coach that they wanted, but they're now sort of piecing together, remaking the team while the season is going on, while he's figuring out like what he really needs to add to what they have.
Yeah, there's I mean, looking at the roster, there really haven't been any additions. I think the only notable name, and that just came through the door at the end of the transfer window here, Aidan O'Neill, yeah, Australian midfielder. He transferred from Standard Liège, the Belgian leagues. I mean, what does he add to the team? I mean, if he is your only piece that you've really added over this transfer window, what does he add to this team that they really needed?
He's the like for like James Sands replacement. I mean, he's the true sort of number 6 defensive midfielder that is pretty good breaking up play, making tackles, interceptions in the midfield. He's the sort of last line of defense that they've been missing, I think, where Keaton Parks has had a really strong season, and Keaton Parks played next to James Sands in the sort of two-man midfield centrally for years while they were together at NYCFC. And that's who Jonathan Shore, the 18-year-old, has been playing with next to him, Keaton Parks. And Aidan O'Neill, I think, comes in as the veteran replacement for Sands, who's not 18, who has experience playing in Belgium, playing in Australia. He's familiar to the City Football Group universe because he played with Melbourne City in the Australian A-League for years and won the championship there, I think, a couple times. He finished first in the league a couple times and won their playoffs at least once. So he's had a lot of experience in, I think, leagues comparable to MLS. He's more seasoned in his career, and he's somebody that seems like he would be able to plug and play in MLS and perform well as that sort of defensive midfielder that they missed. And another thing that they've done is they've basically converted a defensive midfielder that they produced, Justin Hack, into a center back. He's been playing center back paired with Thiago Martins pretty much for the last handful of games this season, and that seems to be emerging as the preferred center back tandem. So O'Neill comes in, I think, to allow them to keep Hack in. Oh, sorry, there's an ambulance passing. Very New York City in the background. You can just hear an ambulance going by. Sorry about that, everybody. But yes, O'Neill comes in to let them keep Hack in central defense and replace Sands and what Sands did while basically being the defensive destroyer in the midfield for the last number of years he was here. And I think that the big thing that they haven't replaced is Santi Rodriguez, the number 10 sort of creative attacking midfielder. They're still relying on Maxi Morales, who's 38 years old, to play that role match after match. He's played 92% of available minutes so far this season, which is he's 38 and had his ACL repaired 2 years ago. So he's very much like at the end part of his career, but still being asked to do a lot of heavy lifting in the midfield because they don't have a player like Santi Rodriguez who's just there to step in now that he's gone. They didn't do what Cincinnati did when they sold Lucho Acosta and have Evander ready to come in. And that's what we talk about it on the Hudson River Blue podcast. Shout out to the podcast that I'm on every week. If you want to listen to something about NYCFC, that's where we are. But we've talked about it pretty much since the season began, that Maxi Morales was probably the best player in NYCFC's history. But you can't expect him to still be playing at the level he was playing at when they won MLS Cup in 2021, when he was one of the best players in the league in like 2018, 2019. In 2025, after all the stuff that I talked about where he tore up his knee and he's just been playing for years at this point. So that's the big glaring missing piece, I think. A sort of designated player number 10 type, like Evander, but obviously not Evander. But yes, that's the thing that I think everybody's anticipating them signing somebody like that this summer when the window opens again in late July, just because that's like the one spot that is very much open.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you were talking about Aidan O'Neill and Melbourne City. I did a quick search and he joined right after former FC Cincinnati Harrison Delbridge left the team. So it's like, almost a connection there. So,
wow.
Yeah. But I mean, we're talking about these additions and subtractions. You're seeing the other big names there. I mean, James Sand, you've mentioned, Thales Magno is out the door as well. That's a loan. Mijatovic is also a loan. Christian McFarland transferred to Man City. I mean, are any of the other than Sands? I think Sands is a significant loss. Any other names though feel that they were significant in their departure?
Well, Thales Magno was just didn't pan out. He was supposed to be the player that was going to be the sort of striker after Tati Castellanos left in 2022, and they've had him on loan to the Brazilian league since basically the summer last year with Corinthians, and he shows no signs of coming back. They haven't sold him permanently yet. He still holds a designated player spot, so it's like sort of a tough situation because he's not on the team anymore, but they don't have the maximum ability to replace him until they sell him.
Right.
Mijatovic, I think, just didn't work in NYCFC. In MLS, he was hesitant, I think, even to come to the US to play originally, and there was speculation that he wasn't really signing with NYCFC, but really wanted to sign with City Football Group before anyway. So I think that was one of those moves where he joined the multi-club model family and will just be moved around until they find a permanent sort of place for him. So those are like young players that I think they counted on being a part of the future successful NYCFC team that didn't work here, and that has not, they haven't sort of sold them yet, so they're still kind of around, which makes it tricky. But I think the roster just doesn't have experienced options outside of a few positions. I think now that they've signed O'Neal, they have a pretty good setup in midfield, but they're still relying on young players in their sort of attacking positions that I mentioned at the, like Augustino Heda, Julian Fernandez, have not sort of blossomed yet. So I think there's still just a lot of trying to figure out who's going to be the right player in the right spot for them as part of the next best NYCFC 11 that you could produce. I think they still haven't figured that quite out yet.
Yeah, so they're still looking. It sounds like they're still looking for that offensive spark behind the likes of Alonso Martinez and Hannes Wolf, who I think really have only scored the crux of the offense that's come through. I mean, should we be betting the under in this game, because you've also got a very solid defense?
Yeah, the back line has actually settled and played better, and I think Matt Freese is still a very top goalkeeper, and he and Celentano both having strong seasons to start the year. So
there's a reason that he had his name in that Golden Glove situation last year.
Yeah, I think the idea that there'll be a ton of goals scored, probably not easy to see for me, because I know NYCFC's attack has been futile for early in the season. Alonso Martinez has scored 6 of their 12 goals, and honestly, a few of them, I think 2 of the 3 have been penalty kicks, and he's been the sole source of attacking joy for NYCFC. Wolf has been a solid player since they picked him up, basically on a free before last season, from Borussia Mönchengladbach, and he, I think, is their second best attacking option right now, but he's much more of a sort of like pass before the assist passer or assist maker, versus like he's never scored more than 8 goals in his career. He's not going to be the sort of threat, I think, in front of goal that they still kind of lack besides Alonso Martinez. But Alonso Martinez has scored a ton of his goals at home, and he has been basically the goal scorer for NYCFC since he took over as striker. And he wasn't a striker signed by NYCFC as a winger. Nick Cushing decided to try him at striker because Munsef Bakrar had such trouble basically coming close to scoring while getting start after start at striker at the beginning of 2024. And Martinez has just run with it and basically has been near the top of the Golden Boot standing since he started playing striker full time, and has a chance to make a run at it again this year because he's just entrenched as their go-to number 9 at this point. And everything that they've sort of, when they've needed a goal in the second half, he's the one that's been able to score it. He's been the one that's just sort of always stepped up this season and even late last season to get the kind of goals that they need. And I think obviously Cincinnati will probably be game planning pretty heavily to stop him because he is where it's all going for NYCFC right now.
Yeah, that's the matchup that I'm looking at. I know that Matt Miazga has only had a few games and hasn't played a full 90 minutes, but the matchup of Miazga and Martinez in the middle, to see how the flow, the dynamics work between the two players. And if Miazga doesn't go a full 90, who really fills that void? I wouldn't be surprised if you see Miazga play, let's say 60 minutes, and then they bring in maybe Flores to probably play the extra 30. But right now, FC Cincinnati has a depth of knowledge back there. And so I'm looking at this being a low scoring game. I mean, let's open the floor to you. Let's play the Growler Cup that we did last year. What is the result that you see coming out of this game?
I think Cincinnati wins 2-1. I don't think NYCFC is gonna be able to get a positive result against them. I think I predicted on my podcast, on the Hudson River Blue podcast, that it would be a draw. But I think even thinking about that, I can't stand strongly behind it. I still think Cincinnati wins in the end, just because I think that the NYCFC backline is better, but Kevin Denke is very good. And he and Evander together scares me more than many of the attacking tandems that NYCFC have faced so far. And also, I mean, Cincinnati played NYCFC so many times last season, and the only win NYCFC got was the playoff game that kept their season alive at Citi Field. But I also think they beat them in the regular season at Red Bull Arena too. And that was like, I think that was one of the many matches that they played. And I think it's one of these things where I still don't really buy that NYCFC is at the point where they can, even with the comfort of home and the little momentum that they got winning in Toronto, I just don't have confidence that they're at the level that Cincinnati's on right now. I do think that the Matt Freese will play a big part probably because he makes a difference for them positively pretty much every game that they play in some form. Even when he doesn't have a ton of saves, he is the reason why they look as good as they can look defensively. But I still just don't think that they're at the point where they can string back-to-back wins together, especially knowing the tough opponent that they're facing. So I give the visitors the edge, and I think that it's tough to see many teams truly like Cincinnati separating themselves at the top a little bit with a few other teams, I think, including the other team from Ohio in the Eastern Conference. So I think it's tough for NYCFC to get to that level yet. They talk a lot about wanting to be one of the top sort of 4 teams in the East, but this will be a reminder that they're not there yet, I think.
Yeah. But I also see like New York blanked Columbus. We'll say their name. We're not afraid of them. They blanked Columbus earlier in the season at Columbus. So
Columbus blanked themselves in that game, though. They had so many chances. That was one of those like, yes, hold on for dear life and get a 0-0 and be thankful for it situations big time. Yeah.
But I still think that there's defense back there for New York City to produce. Thiago Martins has been sort of the thorn in our pride every time we've played you guys.
Yeah, he scored his first goal ever for NYCFC against Cincinnati in that playoff series. So that was big for him. He was missing. He missed the entire preseason with an injury that he picked up like right at the beginning of preseason and had to be sort of eased back in at the beginning of this year. And I think that was a big sort of challenge right at the first couple of games because they didn't have him. And it was the coach's, first couple of games without sort of the captain of the team. But since he's been back, he scored a very ugly own goal and had a bit of a mix up with Matt Freese in the loss in Atlanta. But he still is the sort of best player. He's their only designated player on their roster right now. And I think he's their best defensive player pretty comfortably, even with the sort of occasional hiccups that he's had that FC Cincinnati fans will also remember when he got a red card and an own goal in the same game at Citi Field in 2022. So that was also a great moment in the rivalry. I also would say this has the potential to be an Eastern Conference rivalry, maybe, because like they have played so many times and they've played in the playoffs now. And I think there are some testy matches between the teams. So I give it some time, maybe if NYCFC can get better, that they could become potential like natural just rivals where they're playing feisty games more regularly. But maybe that's just me being like hopeful for NYCFC to be good again.
I'm trying to go back in time. I think, we're talking about own goals. I mean, that 5-0 loss that we had a long time ago.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was the first home match for NYCFC after the pandemic, no fan shutdown. That was a big.
And I think we scored 2 goals, but they were on own goals from Nick Hagland.
Yes.
So
interesting. Some interesting games in the history of the teams. Definitely.
I'm gonna say let's make it more interesting. I don't see us holding a clean sheet. I think we're going to give up a goal, and it's going to be an own goal. Let's do that. I think this field is so compact that weird bounces are going to happen. I'm going to say an own goal is going to present itself somehow. I will predict an FC win. 2-1 sounds about right. I mean, 1 goal wins has been the norm for Pat Noonan's teams. It's not, it's not the sense of like we're dangling the carrot away from the opposition. It's that we're playing down to the opposition. And I think we did that against Sporting Kansas City last weekend. We've done it to teams like Toronto. We've done it to a lot of the teams in this winning streak that we've got. I'm going to say it's a 2-1 win. Sounds about right.
All right. So we're unanimous. That's interesting. So we're either going to be totally right or totally wrong.
Well, you're talking to the guy that's always wrong. So I'm betting that the totally wrong part, but we're about at the end of all this information, all this glut of information we've gotten from New York City. Can't wait for you guys to come down here. I every time I've gone to a New York City game at TQL Stadium, the boo birds seem to be very loud. I remember 2 red cards back in, I want to say 2021, when we were christening the stadium, and I'm pretty sure that things just have not been steady since then. Ever since then, New York City seems to bring out the booze in a lot of the fans here.
It's the New Yorkers in us. I don't know. We get people riled up for some reason somehow.
Oh, it was pretty bad back then, but I think you're going to still see a great game no matter what. It better be, because I'm going to be making that trip. So
weekend afternoons when the weather's right in the either baseball stadium is actually a pretty nice setting. It's always been pretty good to go to the day games when they've been played. I still remain very thankful that they have had more scheduled this year, just because 7:30 p.m. on a Saturday can only go so far when you don't get any other variety of when the games happen. So it's nice to have a couple weekend afternoon games mixed in at least.
Yeah. So we'll have a great time there. I'm glad that you're sort of giving us a little bit of a guided tour there.
Well, I gotta give you a scarf if you're doing a swap, because I'll be there. I'll be in the press box. So we gotta link up for that.
I'll try to knock on your door and see what we can do.
We'll make it happen. I'll be there.
But if we had any more questions for Citi Field, where can we contact you on social media?
So our site only does Blue Sky and Instagram now. So we are HudsonRiverBlue.com on Blue Sky. So you can find us there. I think we're at Hudson River Blue on Instagram and Threads too. Those are the only things we did. We made the brand decision to leave Twitter in January and haven't looked back, and hasn't really affected us negatively, which is cool. So our readers found us where they needed to find us, and that works out great. So HudsonRiverBlue.com is our site where we basically every day have new stuff about NYCFC, MLS, anything you would want to read about that sort of relates to New York soccer. We cover it. So definitely check us out when you're interested in that kind of stuff.
Excellent. I'll take a listen to it. I want to hear, what the preview has to be for this game as well. And see what
Hudson River Blue podcast. We are just called the Hudson River Blue podcast. We keep it simple, so you can find us. And we predict every final result of every match. I was the only member of our 3-person panel who predicted that they would beat Toronto and that they would sign a player on deadline day. So I got the bragging rights for me and my 2 co-hosts. So there you go.
Very good.
We're putting a lot of hope on Aiden O'Neill, who probably will not be playing. He won't be playing in this game because his visa is not resolved yet. But yes, he'll be eventually playing for NYCFC.
A visa that hasn't been processed in time. Perish the thought. That happens with us all the time as well. But Andrew, I want to thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. Guys, if you want to hear more of our podcasts, go on to our website at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. Become a Patreon member. We'd love to listen to what you guys have to say about our stuff. Go to your favorite podcasting platform, look for Jersey Swap, or go to our Cincy Soccer Talk social media. We're on Instagram. We're on Blue Sky. We're on X, whatever we want to call it. But yeah, guys, thank you very much for listening. I always say this to all my guests: keep your kit clean. Thanks for joining us, Andrew.
Thank you.